Neoplasms of the esophagus. Benign pathologies. Benign epithelial lesions include papillomas, avascular polyps, glycogen acanthosis, parakeratosis, lipomas, lymphangiomas and hemangiomas. They are benign, though parakeratosis is associated with malignancy of the esophagus and head and neck region. Inlet patches, also referred to as heterotopic gastric mucosa, are common and are most often found within a short distance of the postcricoid region, figure 66.40. They consist of embryonic gastric mucosa, though there are conflicting views as to whether they are truly embryonic or acquired in origin. The discovery of inlet patches is usually incidental on endoscopy. Biopsies will show corpus or fundus-type gastric mucosa, sometimes even with parietal cells. Most are incidental and can be observed. An association with globus sensation, chronic cough and laryngopharyngeal reflux has been suggested. The patches can be ablated with RFA, argon plasma coagulation or multipolar electrocoagulation. Resolution of symptoms, however, is unpredictable. Esophageal duplication cysts are congenital anomalies that arise during early embryonic development. They are located within the esophageal wall, covered by two muscle layers, and contain squamous epithelium or a lining compatible with that found in the embryonic esophagus. Sometimes heterotopic gastric or pancreatic mucosa can be found. Most duplication cysts do not communicate with the esophageal lumen, run parallel with the esophagus and are asymptomatic unless large. Symptomatic duplication cysts can be resected. Granular cell tumors are rare. On endoscopy they are typically sessile, yellowish-white and submucosal. They feel FRM when prodded with a biopsy forceps. On EUS, they are hyperechoic and arise from the submucosal layer. They most likely arise from Schwann cells, suggesting a neural origin. Rarely they undergo malignant transformation. Schwannomas are often found incidentally. If large, surgical removal is indicated. Leiomyomas are the most common solid benign tumors of the esophagus, figure 66.42. They are mostly found incidentally as a submucosal mass on endoscopy but may produce compressive symptoms when large. EUS shows a hypoechoic mass arising from the muscularis propria or the submucosal layer. They rarely become malignant. However, resection is indicated if enlarging on serial assessment. Small leiomyomas can be enucleated with a thoracoscopic approach, keeping the mucosa intact. Preoperative biopsy or EUS-guided FNA needle aspiration, FNA, is relatively contraindicated as the consequent scarring will increase the chance of breaching the mucosa during enucleation. Endoscopic resection is possible using submucosal tunneling endoscopic resection, STUR. This creates a mucosal opening a short distance from the leiomyoma, 3–5 cm proximally, allowing a submucosal tunnel to reach the lesion. The lesion is resected using ESD techniques and the specimen retrieved via the mouth. The mucosal opening is closed with clips, figure 66.43. Because of the availability of STUR, the threshold of removing smaller leiomyomas is reduced because of its minimal invasiveness. Larger lesions, perhaps larger than 5 cm, are technically challenging and are better removed thoracoscopically. Leiomyosarcoma is rare and resection offers a chance of cure. Esophageal gastrointestinal stromal tumors, GISTs, are uncommon and are usually found at the OGJ, proximal stomach. They should be managed along the same principles as GIST in the rest of the gastrointestinal tract. Carcinoma of the esophagus epidemiology. Esophageal cancer is the 8th most common cancer worldwide and the 6th most common cause of cancer death. It most commonly presents in the 6th and 7th decades of life. Squamous cell carcinoma and adenocarcinoma are the most common cell types, while other malignancies such as melanoma and small cell carcinomas are rare. Secondary malignancies are likewise rare. However, bronchogenic carcinoma or metastatic lymph nodes can invade the esophagus. Squamous cell cancer is the predominant histological cell type, but there are significant geographical and ethnic variations, with the incidence of esophageal cancer 50 to 100-fold higher in areas of high incidence than in the rest of the world. Squamous cell carcinoma incidence remains steady. However, among white populations, especially in developed Western countries, there has been an epidemiological shift since the 1990s from squamous cell carcinoma to adenocarcinoma such that the incidence of adenocarcinoma has surpassed that of squamous cell cancer. Etiology. The etiological factors for the development of esophageal cancer vary between the two main cell types, Table 66.3. Genetic predisposition may be important in the pathogenesis of esophageal squamous cell cancer. While smoking and alcohol intake are independent contributing factors, genetic polymorphism is important in individuals with chronic alcohol consumption. Approximately 36% of East Asians show a physiological response to drinking that includes facial flushing, nausea and tachycardia. This facial flushing response is predominantly related to an inherited deficiency in the enzyme aldehyde dehydrogenase 2, ALDH2. Alcohol is metabolized to acetaldehyde by alcohol dehydrogenase, and the acetaldehyde is in turn metabolized by ALDH2 to acetate. Individuals with variants of the ALDH2 gene may have a suboptimal level of the enzyme, leading to the accumulation of the carcinogen acetaldehyde. For squamous cell cancer, dietary and environmental factors are important. Nitrosamines and their precursors, nitrate, nitrite and secondary amines, commonly found in preserved food, such as pickled vegetables, have been identified as predisposing factors. Nutritional depletion of certain micronutrients, particularly vitamins A, C and A, niacin, riboflavin, molybdenum, manganese, zinc, magnesium and selenium, as well as dietary deficiencies of fresh fruit and vegetables, together with an inadequate protein intake, predisposes the esophageal epithelium to neoplastic transformation. Other dietary risk factors include consumption of hot beverages, chewing betel nuts and drinking yerba mate in South American countries. Patients with other aerodigestive malignancies are at particularly high risk, presumably because of exposure to similar environmental carcinogens. Using esophageal cancer as the index tumor, multiple primary cancers are found in about 10% of patients, of which 70% are in the aerodigestive tract. The overall incidence of synchronous or metachronous esophageal cancer in patients with primary head and neck cancer is estimated to be 3%. The rise in incidence of adenocarcinoma coincides with the increase in obesity, GORD and Barrett's esophagus in Western populations. GORD affects up to 44% of the general population in the USA, and approximately 5 to 8% will develop Barrett's esophagus, with an estimated annual rate of neoplastic transformation of 0.2–0.5% per year. Pathology, clinical features and diagnosis. Esophageal cancer has a poor prognosis, which is in part related to late presentation. Patients with early disease have no symptoms and the cancer tends to metastasize early. Both squamous cell and adenocarcinoma develop from dysplastic mucosa. Most adenocarcinomas are mucin-producing with intestinal-type features. Squamous cell cancers tend to be found in the middle and upper part of the esophagus, while adenocarcinoma predominantly affects the lower esophagus and OGJ. Both cell types may directly infiltrate adjacent organs and, depending on tumor location, can involve the trachea and bronchi, leading to hemoptysis, airway obstruction and even esophagus airway fistula, aorta, though aortoesophageal fistula is rare, diaphragmatic crura or pericardium. The esophageal wall has a rich network of submucosal lymphatics, and therefore longitudinal submucosal spread of cancer is common. Lymph node metastasis can involve the cervical area, the mediastinum as well as the perigastric, celiac axis. Distant hematogenous spread can occur to non-regional lymph nodes, lungs, liver, brain and bones. Peritoneal metastasis is an important mode of spread of adenocarcinoma of the OGJ but is rare for squamous cell cancer. Progressive dysphagia is the most common symptom, related to increasing luminal obstruction by cancer. Early symptoms may include a mild hold-up sensation that, if for squamous cell cancer, dietary and environmental factors are important. Nitrosamines and their precursors, nitrate, nitrite and secondary amines, commonly found in preserved food, such as pickled vegetables, have been identified as predisposing factors. Nutritional depletion of certain micronutrients, particularly vitamins A, C and A, niacin, riboflavin. Progressive dysphagia is the most common symptom, related to increasing luminal obstruction by cancer. Early symptoms may include a mild hold-up sensation that, if for squamous cell cancer, dietary and environmental factors. Ignored, will progress from dysphagia to a solid, soft and eventually to a liquid diet. There may often be anorexia, weight loss, odynophagia and regurgitation symptoms. Hoarseness may indicate involvement of either recurrent laryngeal nerve. Aspiration and choking symptoms may be related not only to tumor obstruction but also to the presence of an esophagus airway fistula. Choking and cough on drinking water are typical of fistulation and associated hemoptysis is common. Blood loss is less common for squamous cell cancer than adenocarcinoma. Chronic blood loss can lead to iron deficiency anemia. Acute gastrointestinal bleeding can occur, though it is rarely severe, except for aortoesophageal fistula, which usually presents with a smaller sentinel bleed followed by massive bleeding that is invariably fatal. Early cancers are usually asymptomatic and are only picked up on endoscopy performed for other reasons, except in countries where screening program exists. For squamous cell dysplasia and cancer, chromoendoscopy using Lugol's iodine is a useful adjunct. Figure 66.44, the normal squamous mucosa will be stained brown, while dysplastic and early cancer remains unstained. NBI light consists of only two wavelengths, 415 nanometer blue light and 540 nanometer green light. The differential absorption and reflection of these spectra facilitates detection of mucosal abnormalities, see Chapter 9. A classification of an intraepithelial capillary loop (IPCL) system has been introduced to grade the severity of these early neoplastic changes, figure 66.45. For patients with advanced cancer, diagnosis is usually not difficult. A barium contrast study may demonstrate the tumor as an ulcerated or stenotic lesion with proximal. Dilatation, figure 66.46. Endoscopy will visualize the tumor, figure 66.47, allowing biopsies or brush cytology to confirm the histology. Attempts can be made to traverse the tumor stenosis. If significant dysphagia and weight loss are present, a nasogastric tube can be placed for nutritional buildup. The stomach is assessed for other pathologies in case it will be used to replace the esophagus when esophagectomy is performed. Care should also be taken to assess the rest of the esophagus, pharynx and larynx to ensure no synchronous tumors are present. The movement of the vocal cords should be assessed. For cancers of the mid or upper esophagus in proximity to the airway, a bronchoscopic examination is required to ensure no airway involvement, in which case esophagectomy will be contraindicated. Disease staging. Careful disease staging is essential to guide therapy. Current staging classification according to the American Joint Committee on Cancer, AJCC, Union for International Cancer Control, UICC, 8th edition, is shown in Table 66.4. The T stage advances as the tumor invades from mucosa deep to muscle, adventitia and beyond the esophagus. Regional nodes. Encompass the paratracheal nodes from the neck, through the mediastinum to the upper abdomen, including the celiac nodes. The segregation of N1 to N3 is by the number of involved lymph nodes. Location is defined by the position of the epicenter of the tumor in the esophagus, figure 66.1. Stage groupings differ among squamous and adenocarcinomas. Separate groupings are assigned for clinical, CTNM, pathological, PTNM, and post-neoadjuvant, YPTNM, systems. Because of the complexity, these are not reproduced in this chapter, but readers can refer to the staging manual. Controversy exists as to whether adenocarcinoma of the OGJ should be staged as esophageal or gastric cancer. According to the latest staging definitions, a tumor involving the OGJ with its epicenter no more than 2 cm into the gastric cardia is staged as adenocarcinoma of the esophagus, while those with a center located at more than 2 cm distal to the anatomical OGJ are staged as gastric cancer. TNM classification of esophageal cancer. T. Primary tumor TXT0 TIS. Tumor cannot be assessed, no evidence of primary tumor. T1, T2, T3, T4. TIS. High-grade dysplasia, defined as malignant. High-grade dysplasia, defined as malignant cells confined to the epithelium by the basement membrane. T1. Tumor invades the lamina propria, muscularis mucosae or submucosa. T1A. Tumor invades the lamina propria or muscularis mucosae. T1B. Tumor invades submucosa. T2. Tumor invades the muscularis propria. T3. Tumor invades adventitia. T4. Tumor invades the adjacent structures. T4A. Tumor invades the pleura, pericardium, azygos vein, diaphragm or peritoneum. T4B. Tumor invades other adjacent structures, such as the aorta, vertebral body or airway. NX. Regional nodal status cannot be assessed. N0. No regional lymph node metastasis. N1. Metastasis in 1 or 2 regional lymph nodes. N2. Metastasis in 3 to 6 regional lymph. N3. Metastasis in 7 or more regional lymph nodes. M0 no distant metastasis. M1 distant metastasis. Endoscopic and percutaneous ultrasonography. The CT stage and paroesophageal nodes are best staged using EUS. EUS is the only imaging modality able to distinguish the various layers of the esophageal wall, usually seen as FVA alternating hyper and hypoechoic layers using 12 MHz ultrasound, figure 66.49. Infiltration to adjacent structures, CT4, is most accurately assessed. The accuracy of EUS for tumor and nodal staging averages 85% and 75%, respectively. The drawback is that many advanced cancers do not permit passage of a conventional echo endoscope, though most non-traversable tumors are likely to be at least CT3. Miniaturized ultrasonography catheter probes can be used to pass through the working channel of a conventional endoscope. EUS-guided FNA can be used to obtain cytological proof of involved lymph nodes. Bronchoscopic examination can assess airway involvement by the tumor. Percutaneous ultrasonography of cervical nodes is useful, as FNA can be obtained in the same setting. Computed tomography scan in diagnosing possible T4 cancer by CT scan, obliteration of the fat plane between the esophagus and the aorta, trachea and bronchi, and pericardium is suggestive of invasion, but the paucity of fat in cachectic patients makes this criterion unreliable. Diagnosis of paroesophageal nodes is less accurate than with EUS, but distant nodes are better assessed by CT scan. Figure 66.49. Fluorodeoxyglucose positron emission tomography scans squamous cell cancers are usually fluorodeoxyglucose, FDG, AVID, figure 66.50. Detection of the primary tumor is useful. Adenocarcinomas of the OGJ sometimes show limited or absent FDG accumulation regardless of tumor volume, FDG non-avidity. Positron emission tomography, PET, does not deepen the esophageal wall and thus has no value in CT staging. Its spatial resolution is also insufficient to separate the primary tumor with juxtatumoral nodes because of interference from the primary cancer. It is mostly used for detecting regional and non-regional nodes, as well as distant metastases. The uptake by the tumor may have some prognostic value, and change in uptake after neoadjuvant treatment is similarly useful in predicting histological response and outcome. Laparoscopy. Laparoscopic staging is useful in adenocarcinomas, especially those of the OGJ, but not for squamous cell cancer. Laparoscopy should be reserved for patients in whom confirmation of metastatic disease that is not otherwise obtainable is essential in deciding on treatment. Treatment. Stage-directed therapy treatment principles depend on the disease stage and physiological reserve of patients. Patients should be discussed in a multidisciplinary team to decide on the best course of management. When distant metastatic disease is identified, palliation is the aim. Endoscopic treatment. The chance of nodal metastasis depends on the depth of infiltration of the primary tumor. Cancers that are confined to the mucosa, T1A, rarely metastasize, but squamous tumors that have infiltrated the submucosa, T1B, have a substantial risk of nodal spread. In adenocarcinoma, the corresponding risk is less. Such early cancers may be amenable to curative endoscopic treatment, figure 66.51. EMR involves the injection of saline, or other solutions such as glycerol or hyaluronic acid, into the submucosal plane to raise the mucosal lesion. It is then sucked into a cap FT-TED onto the tip of the endoscope, looped by a snare wire and cut by electrocautery. The limitation of this method is the size of the cap, so it is generally recommended for smaller lesions. For larger lesions, if resected by EMR, piecemeal resection is required. Therefore, it is associated with higher incomplete resection and recurrence rates. ESD is more complex. It involves FRST marking the margins. Of the lesion, then submucosal injection, cutting the mucosal edges along the line of marking, submucosal dissection of the tumor from its bed, superficial to the muscle layer, and lastly hemostasis. There are various knives that can be inserted via the biopsy channel of the endoscope to carry out these procedures. Technically, ESD is more demanding than EMR but is not limited by the size of the lesion for en-bloc resection. There is an increased risk of post-resection stricture formation if too much of the circumference of the mucosa, such as over 2/3, is removed. This chance is somewhat reduced by steroid treatment, often endoscopic injection at the time of EMR, ESD, combined with oral medication for some time. For early Barrett's cancer, EMR and ESD are options, and additional circumferential resection or ablation of the whole length of Barrett's mucosa can be done. For ablative therapy, RFA is most commonly used. RFA energy is delivered by the bipolar electrode and the energy causes frictional heating of cellular water molecules. After ablation, in the presence of a non-acid milieu, suppressed by a high-dose PPI, the epithelium would regenerate to be squamous cell mucosa. The advantage of RFA is that it is technically easy to operate, but the drawback is that no surgical specimen for detailed histopathological examination is available. Other examples of ablative technique include cryotherapy or photodynamic therapy. Because the pretreatment distinction of T1A and T1B disease may not be accurate, it may be prudent to perform endoscopic resection FRST in case of uncertain diagnosis. Should the resected specimen be found to be T1A with clear margins and without lymphovascular permeation in the pathological examination, the endoscopic treatment is deemed curative. If the tumor is found to be deeper than expected or if resection margins are not clear, further therapy can be planned. Surgery. The primary indication for surgical resection is for potential cure, which can be achieved in patients whose tumors are confined to its wall and only limited local, regional disease is found. One should aim to maximize the chance of an R0 resection, macroscopic and microscopic clearance of proximal, distal and lateral margins, a parameter that has consistently been shown to result in the best long-term survival. Surgical resection alone is generally indicated for more advanced cancers when endoscopic treatment is unlikely to be curative, T1B, T2, N0. For patients with more advanced disease, is greater than or equal to T3, N+, multimodality treatment is usually preferred. Patient selection and preparation. Esophagectomy is a major procedure. Patients should be assessed carefully for operative risk and their physiological status optimized. Cardiorespiratory assessments are essential. Patients must stop smoking and alcohol intake. Chest physiotherapy is instituted, and incentive spirometry is a good preoperative exercise. Patients with high-grade esophageal tumor stenosis may have lost a substantial amount of weight. A FNE-bore nasogastric tube can be placed for nutritional support while workup is performed. Feeding jejunostomy is an alternative. Enhanced recovery after surgery, ERAS, programs entail preoperative, rehabilitation, as well, Table 66.5. All measures are aimed to optimize patients for surgery. Immediate preoperative preparations include prophylactic antibiotics in deep vein thrombosis prophylaxis. Bowel preparation is not necessary unless a colonic interposition is intended. Surgical techniques. Choice of surgical approach. The choice of the appropriate technique depends mainly on I. The location of the tumor, E. The intended extent of lymphadenectomy, and E. The reconstructive technique. The surgeon should be well versed in the methods adopted to different clinical situations. For ease of description, the following sections discuss the surgical approach by tumor location. Cervical esophageal cancer surgery involves removing the pharynx, larynx and esophagus. Pharyngo-laryngo-esophagectomy, a gastric pull-up is used to anastomose with the neopharynx. In cases where involvement of the cervical esophagus is limited, pharyngo-laryngo-cervical esophagectomy can be carried out without the need for total esophageal resection. The resultant gap can be bridged using either a free jejunal graft or various musculocutaneous FAPs. Definitive chemoradiotherapy has become the preferred alternative treatment to preserve the larynx. Surgery is therefore mostly reserved for salvage, when there is an incomplete response or for recurrent disease. Intrathoracic esophageal cancer. The surgical procedures usually performed are fill circle left thoracoabdominal incision via a large incision traversing the chest and upper abdomen, The whole left upper quadrant of the abdomen and left thoracic cavity are accessed at the same time for esophagectomy, gastroplasty and anastomosis, figure 66.52a. Filled circle Lewis-Tanner, or Ivor-Lewis, procedure. This is a two-phase esophagectomy consisting of laparotomy for gastric mobilization and tubularization, followed by a right thoracotomy for esophageal resection. The gastroplasty is delivered into the right thoracic cavity for an esophagogastrostomy near the apex of the chest, figure 66.52b. Filled circle McEwen, a three-stage esophagectomy. This consists of the mobilization of the thoracic esophagus and lymphadenectomy via a thoracotomy, usually right side, followed by abdominal and neck incisions for preparation of the esophageal substitute, usually the stomach, and its delivery to the neck for a cervical anastomosis. Filled circle left thoracic resection, suite esophagectomy. Via a single posterolateral incision on the left chest wall, usually FFTH to 6th intercostal space, the esophagus is mobilized. The diaphragm is opened and the gastroplasty prepared from this opening. The stomach is delivered to the left thoracic cavity for anastomosis. Filled circle transhiatal esophagectomy. Through a cervical and abdominal approach, the esophagus is mobilized via both directions, being stripped out bluntly from its mediastinal bed. The gastric conduit is delivered to the neck for cervical anastomosis, figure 66.53. Filled circle minimally invasive surgical approaches. Traditional open procedures, described above, are increasingly replaced by minimally invasive methods, by a combination of video-assisted thoracoscopy, VATS, and laparoscopy or robotic techniques, figure 66.54. Both thoracic and abdominal phases can be performed via minimally invasive techniques, or one phase can be minimally invasive and the other by open surgery, hybrid procedures. The anastomosis can be constructed in the chest or the neck. Esophagogastric junction cancer. The options detailed above for intrathoracic cancers also apply to cancers of the OGJ. Suitability depends in part on the extent of esophageal and gastric involvement by cancer and the intended extent of resection and lymphadenectomy. In addition, an extended total radical gastrectomy can be performed. The whole stomach and the lower esophagus, accessed via the esophageal hiatus from the abdomen, are resected and intestinal continuity is restored with a jejunal Roux loop, Roux-en-Y reconstruction. In selected patients with early disease, a proximal gastrectomy can be performed as nodal spread to the distal stomach is rare. Extent of lymphadenectomy. Lymphadenectomy ensures adequate nodal sampling for staging, improves local disease control, and increasingly there is evidence to show the prognostic impact of extended lymphadenectomy. The most appropriate extent of lymphadenectomy remains somewhat controversial. Transhiatal esophagectomy does not allow adequate mediastinal nodal dissection. For the mid and upper thoracic part, esophageal mobilization is mostly a blind procedure, and thus is often chosen by surgeons who perform only a limited lower mediastinal dissection for OGJ adenocarcinoma. Squamous cell cancers are mostly more proximally located and the transhiatal approach may be dangerous except in early cancers. The extent of lymphadenectomy can be defined as FELDS. Two-feld dissection refers to lymphadenectomy of the mediastinum and upper abdomen around the celiac trifurcation. The mediastinal FELD is further classified as I, standard, lymphadenectomy below the tracheal bifurcation, E, extended, standard lymphadenectomy plus right paratracheal nodal dissection including those around the right recurrent laryngeal nerve, and E, total, extended lymphadenectomy plus nodal dissection along the left recurrent laryngeal nerve chain, figure 66.55. The third FELD refers to bilateral cervical lymphadenectomy, including those in the paratracheal as well as supraclavicular foci. The most appropriate extent of lymphadenectomy. remains a contentious issue. For patients with squamous cell cancers, most surgeons would perform at least a total two-feld lymphadenectomy since lymph node mapping data in Japan showed significant nodal metastases, especially around the bilateral recurrent laryngeal nerves. In selected patients and in particular those with upper thoracic cancers, additional third-feld nodal dissection is performed, three-feld lymphadenectomy. For esophageal adenocarcinoma, most surgeons perform an infracarinal two-feld lymphadenectomy. For OGJ tumors, in particular those with limited esophageal extent and center on the OGJ, surgeons are divided among those who prefer esophagectomy and those who perform extended total gastrectomy with limited lower esophageal resection and lymphadenectomy. The issue is unsettled. The extent of resection and lymphadenectomy has to be balanced against associated morbidities and physiological reserve of the individual patient. Reconstruction. Restoration of intestinal continuity after esophageal extirpation is mostly done using a gastric conduit. The right gastropiploic vessels are its main blood supply. A pyloric drainage procedure is optional, with some surgeons advocating its use to facilitate gastric emptying after the inevitable vagotomy. In the case of a previous gastrectomy, or if concomitant pathology, such as gastric cancer, requires its removal, the colon, right ileocolon, left or transverse colon, can be used. The surgery is more extensive and 3 anastomoses are required. The conduit can be placed in the right thoracic cavity, as in after a Lewis Tanner esophagectomy, or the neck for cervical. Esophagogastrostomy. In the case of a neck anastomosis, 3-injection thyroplasty can temporarily improve glottic closure. Choices of routes of reconstruction exist: posterior mediastinal, and coughing effort and lower the chance of aspiration. More retrosternal or subcutaneous. Definitive therapy may be needed if vocal cord function does not return. Perioperative care for most patients. A standardized clinical pathway is helpful, along the lines of the ERAS protocol, Table 66.5. ERAS is a global perioperative quality improvement initiative based on attenuation of the stress response to surgical injury. The gastrointestinal system is central to many of the core ERAS elements, including carbohydrate loading, no prolonged fasting, avoidance of mechanical bowel preparation, avoidance of nasogastric intubation, maintaining fluid balance and early feeding. Employing these ERAS care practices leads to improved clinical outcome. Management of complications. Complications are common as patients are often elderly with pre-existing morbidities and surgery is extensive. Atelectasis and pneumonia are managed by chest physiotherapy, adequate pain relief, avoidance of fluid overload, appropriate antibiotics and, if needed, sputum suction by bronchoscopy. Atrial fibrillation occurs in around 15 to 20% of patients. It is benign in most and is treated by antiarrhythmic medication. In some patients, it is a reflection of underlying serious complication, such as bronchopneumonia, or more importantly surgical morbidities, such as anastomotic leak or ischemia of the conduit. Its occurrence should prompt appropriate investigations, such as endoscopy. Recurrent laryngeal nerve injury is not uncommon when superior mediastinal lymphadenectomy or neck nodal dissection is carried out. Postoperatively, the patient will experience hoarseness of the voice, coughing becomes less effective, and aspiration may be a problem when the diet is introduced. Active chest therapy and delay of oral intake may be necessary. Injection thyroplasty can temporarily improve glottic closure. Choices of routes of reconstruction exist: posterior mediastinal, and coughing effort and lower the chance of aspiration. More retrosternal or subcutaneous. Definitive therapy may be needed if vocal cord function does not return. Perioperative care for most patients. Gross ischemia of the conduit usually presents within the FRST 2 to 3 days after the operation and dictates taking down of the conduit, adequate drainage and staged reconstruction later once sepsis is under control, figure 66.56. In selected cases, immediate reanastomosis is an option if the patient is hemodynamically stable and an adequate length of healthy stomach remains. Clinically apparent thoracic anastomotic leaks usually occur within the FRST week. Signs of sepsis and excessive output from the chest drain, which may be turbid in color, may lead to the diagnosis. The location and magnitude of the leak can be visualized by a water-soluble contrast study. A carefully performed flexible endoscopic examination is also helpful and will not worsen the leak. For small, contained leaks, CT-guided drainage or use of a luminal vacuum endosponge may succeed. In septic patients with a sizable leak, exploration is warranted to establish drainage. Direct repair is seldom possible. For cervical anastomosis, leakage is suspected when there is inflammation and pain of the neck wound. Turbid infected discharge is found when the skin stitches are removed. Leaks that are truly confined to the neck are simply treated by laying the wound open with daily washing and frequent changes of dressing. Leaks that communicate with the mediastinum may require formal exploration and placement of mediastinal drains. In all leaks, treatment with broad-spectrum antibiotics is required, guided by microbial culture and sensitivity. Nutritional support is essential. With an intrathoracic stomach, careful endoscopic placement of a FNE-BOF feeding tube into the duodenum for enteral feeding is useful. Injection of F-Brin glue, placement of intraluminal stents, use of a luminal vacuum. Endosponge or endoscopic clip closure of the defect are increasingly used to treat leaks. Sealing of the leak allows early control of sepsis and resumption of oral alimentation. The stent can be removed afterwards, depending on the severity of the leak in the FRST place. Usually, 4 to 6 weeks will suffice for adequate healing. A childless leak is suspected when there is excessive chest drainage. A milk challenge, looking at the color of the effluent before and after taking milk by mouth or via the nasogastric tube, will usually be obvious. This can be aided by biochemical testing of the drain fluid, measuring triglyceride level or chylomicrons. In a low-output FS stooler of less than 0.5-1 liter per day, conservative management with total parenteral nutrition or a mid-chain triglyceride diet may suffice. In case of persistence or if the output is more than 1 liter per day, prolonged conservative treatment is not recommended and early re-exploration is warranted. A lymphangiogram preoperatively will help locate the site of leakage, and intraoperative milk feed will also serve the same purpose. The site of the leak can then be clipped or sutured. Increasingly, however, the interventional radiological method of percutaneous embolization has gained success and has reduced the need for surgical re-exploration. Multimodality treatment strategies. Results from surgical resection alone have improved. Mortality from surgery is less than 5% in dedicated centers. The long-term prognosis remains suboptimal. Since the 1990s, multimodality treatment has gained impetus and is now routine for advanced disease. Neoadjuvant therapy is more popular than postoperative therapy, in the form of either neoadjuvant chemotherapy or chemoradiotherapy. In OGJ cancers, perioperative, pre- and postoperative chemotherapy has advocates. The optimal regimen remains controversial. Recent advances in immunotherapy add to the armamentarium. Overall, after treatment in a multimodality program, a 5-year survival rate of 40 to 50% is expected. The disease stage and the ability to perform an R0 resection are the most powerful predictors of outcome. Palliation. In the presence of distant metastases, palliation is the aim. Dysphagia is the main symptom to relieve. Placement of a self-expanding metallic stent is simple and effective and allows immediate relief of dysphagia, figure 66.57. The risks are stent migration, tumor ingrowth, airway compression and tracheal erosion if placed in the mid and upper esophagus. Other endoscopic methods, such as dilatation, laser treatment and photodynamic therapy, can be used. Chemotherapy, radiotherapy, brachytherapy can help restore luminal patency. In case of bleeding from OGJ tumors, radiotherapy can be hemostatic. Immunotherapy has promise in selected patients. Esophageal cancer. Filled circle squamous cell cancer still predominates in the East, while Barrett's adenocarcinoma is more common in the West. Filled circle late presentation and early spread are reasons for poor prognosis. Filled circle early diagnosis has the best chance of cure. Filled circle lymphatic spread can be widespread, from the neck to the mediastinum and celiac axis. Filled circle adenocarcinomas around the OGJ is sometimes regarded as proximal gastric cancer and treatment is particularly controversial. Miscellaneous conditions. Plummer-Vinson, in the USA, or Patterson-Brown-Kelly syndrome, UK, refers to the offendings of a cervical esophageal web, iron deficiency anemia and dysphagia. It is also known as siderepenic dysphagia. The pathophysiology remains elusive, and the association of iron deficiency is also controversial. Possible mechanisms include iron and nutritional deficiencies, genetic predisposition and autoimmunity. It is a rare disease, mainly affecting middle-aged women. There is a predisposition to post-cricoid, cervical esophageal cancer. A web is distinguished from a Schatzki's ring in that both the proximal and distal surfaces of the web are lined by squamous mucosa. In a Schatzki's ring, the proximal side is lined with squamous mucosa and the distal side by columnar mucosa, coinciding with its location at the squamocolumnar junction. Treatment is with iron therapy, diet modification and, if necessary, endoscopic dilatation of the cervical web. A Schatzki's ring, also known as esophageal B-ring, an A-ring is located a few centimeters proximal to the B-ring, if found, is a mucosal band found at the squamocolumnar junction and is not an uncommon cause of food impaction in adults, figure 66.58. Radiological studies using barium contrast by Schatzki demonstrated that, in individuals with a ring size of less than 13 mm, the symptom of dysphagia may occur. The exact etiology of Schatzki's ring is uncertain but is believed to be related to God. Hiatus hernia is more common. Treatment is by endoscopic dilatation if symptomatic with dysphagia.